What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are in the shop and we're going to continue working on my Jeep Gladiator. So if you saw the last video on this Jeep Gladiator, saw where I installed the Apex Steering Boost steering kit. You also saw where I was doing the new Synergy knuckles and the Dynatrac ball joints. So we're gonna be doing the knuckles and the ball joints in this video right here. So as you can see, I've already got the Jeep lifted up on the lift. You can do this with jack stands, but it's a lot easier if you have a lift. So let me show you what we're gonna be installing. On my parts table right here, you can see I have the two knuckles from Synergy, and then I have the ball joints from Dynatrac. And then I have the Dynatrac ball joints install kits. This is gonna be a huge improvement. So these are Synergy's new steel steering knuckles for the JLs and then the JTs. So this Jeep right here is the 3.6 gas motor, and it does have the aluminum knuckles. I don't know if you heard my knees pop there, but these have the aluminum knuckles. These are pretty much garbage. I cannot figure out why Jeep thought it would be a good idea to put aluminum knuckles on these Jeeps. That is absolutely insane. If somebody could explain that to me like I'm a fifth grader, I would really appreciate that. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is pop the tires off both sides right here. And so as you can already see, I've got the Jeep lifted up, and then probably start tearing it down. So now that I have the tire out of the way, I can kind of show you how to disassemble this pretty quickly. So these cotter pins can be aggravating, but I find if you just use some wire cutters, they pull right out. So you don't want to reuse this. So now I have to get this caliper out of the way. What is this, a 21 millimeter socket? I'm just gonna stick that on the back there. So I'm gonna break that open and do the same at the top here. So that's one of the bolts there. All right, there's the second bolt. So now I'm just gonna pop this caliper assembly off of the rotor. So now I can go ahead and get this rotor out of the way. So I'm gonna take this T30. So there is a Torx bolt right here that you have to take off. I try to always put anti-seize on mine just because, see, the anti-seize is gone on this one. But these will seize up, and it's a huge pain in the butt to get off if they round off. So now this should come right out of the way. So now I'm gonna get this dust shield out of the way. This is a 10 millimeter. So the next thing I'm gonna do is take off the speed sensor. The thing I'm gonna do is take this axle nut off. Best thing you can use is an impact. So now I can actually get this unit bearing off. Now that I have the axle nut out of the way, there is 3 13 millimeter head bolts on the back right here that I'll be taking off. So once they loosen up a little bit, you can kind of turn them with your hand. So that's what the bolt looks like right there. So this bolt actually holds this unit bearing on, and it's also holding on my knuckle light. So you can see right here, there is one of these on the front. So I'm just gonna come from the bottom and break it loose. Now. So I'm just gonna kind of hold this gatekeeper mount up, that way it don't fall. All right, so now I'm just gonna kind of put the gatekeeper light, kind of tangle that up somewhere in the suspension. Now I need to get this unit bearing off. And how I'm gonna do that is just take a dead blow hammer, just give it a couple of whacks. You really don't want to hit this with like a sledgehammer or something, because if you hit this flange right here hard enough, you can actually bend this flange or damage the internals or the bearings inside here. So a dead blow would do just fine. Just be patient. Come to daddy. So this is a good time to inspect your unit bearings. This one feels fine. I believe this is the factory unit bearing here, but you just want to check yours, make sure it's not wobbling around or anything like that. Make sure it spins freely, doesn't tighten up or anything. That one feels okay. So we may just put that one back on the Jeep. So now what I'm gonna do, as you can see, I'm going to pick up on this axle shaft and I'm going to pull it out. Just like that. Hey, got the axle shaft out of the way. Just gonna lay that to the side. So now we've got this 21 millimeter bolt. Is it 21 millimeter? Yes, it is 21 millimeter bolt. So this is your tie rod end right here for your tie rod. So I'm just going to just break this loose. Ow. So got that loose. And I'm just going to get it flush with that right there. Just get this flush. That way I can take my dead blow. So a lot of times what happens with these knuckles, these aluminum knuckles here, is this wallows out. So this will wallow out, and then the passenger side will also wallow out. So the next thing that I'm gonna work on is getting the ball joints out. So these have cotter pins right here. There's that one. You got one at the bottom. I'm just gonna grab on and pull. Grab another bite, pull, just like that. So I'll be using a 22 millimeter socket right here. I'm gonna spin that to the side. Just gonna loosen that one. It's loose. Come right here. Come down here and loosen this. Those weren't very tight at all. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. So now I've got this all ready to come off. Verifying that everything is off. So now I think I can hit it with a hammer. And I'm gonna be hitting about right here a couple of good times. Didn't really damage it that way. You know, if you did want to put this back on, you could if you're wanting to, but this thing is like super light too, by the way. This is nuts. Absolutely nuts. Now we're at the point where we need to get these old crappy ball joints out. These feel like they are the original ball joints, and they don't feel terrible, but they're not going to last much longer. So this is my ball joint press right here. It's just one I got from, I think it was O'Reilly's. So now I've got to figure out the exact setup. I've never done ball joints on this Jeep before, so I've kind of got to play around and figure out which ones I need. Receiving tube. There we go. You can see here the old upper ball joint. It's all rusty and crusty and it's going in the trash. Now I'm going to repeat the same process on the lower ball joint here. Now that I have both ball joints out, I'm just going to come in here and clean them up on the insides really good. Just make sure there's no crusties or anything like that. And another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this caster sleeve out, because this goes in the new knuckle here. So it just kind of, ow. So it just kind of comes out just like that. So we got all this stuff cleaned up, and then we'll be ready to start throwing new parts on. So I did want to pause real quick and just kind of go over some obvious differences on these. Obviously, this is the one that we just took off, and this is the one that we are putting on. And as you can probably tell, this one is a lot heavier. This one is just way heavier, and you can just feel the quality. I mean, Synergy put out a video on YouTube a couple of months ago of them pressure testing these and pressure testing these, and these actually broke the jig that he was pressure testing them with, whereas the aluminum one, the ball joint ear just snapped right off, and this one actually broke the jig. So I say that's pretty daggone awesome. So the last thing that I need from this one is a measurement, and what I'm talking about is the steering stop. I'm just going to measure this steering stop right here just to make sure that I get the same steering stop depth on the new knuckle. And of course, I'll test it once I get the Jeep back down on its own weight and everything like that, but I just want to get myself in the ballpark. So now that I have everything cleaned up in the ball joint ears, I'm old school, and I just like to put just a little bit of grease inside of these ears. And it does not take much, just enough to coat all around, and that just kind of helps with the install. Like I said, this is like an old school trick.
Honey, Frank the Tank is not coming back, okay?
Just go ahead and lather up all those right there. And while I'm doing that, I'm making sure I don't feel any burrs, I don't feel any indentions or anything like that. Like I said, this Jeep's probably never had ball joints, but you know, if you were working on an old school Dana 44 where it might have had 5 or 6 sets of ball joints in its life, then these ears may start developing sharp corners or divots inside, and you just want to make sure that you just kind of file those down before you put your ball joints in. But like I said, this is probably this Jeep's first set of ball joints, so I don't have to worry about that. I have my new ball joints right here. These are the ones from Dynatrac, and these are exact same. So the lowers are the exact same as the uppers. These are definitely top quality. I mean, it even has 2 holes right there for the cotter pin locations. So everything that I've read online, which is honestly not much, I know that the grease fitting goes forward. I'm gonna be, putting it in this way right here. So the grease fitting goes forward. I did see online where there was an option to get the install tool, and I guess they go right there. So I got 2 of these little collars. I probably have some, but they were like $5, and I was like, man, what the heck? So if you don't have like a fancy smancy ball joint press, just get these right here and you'll be able to press them on. I'm going to start with the bottom. You have to start when installing them. You got to start with the bottom. When you're taking them out, you got to start with the top. I'm just going to tighten this all the way up. Now loosen it. So that is perfectly seated. So you can see right here on the ball joints, it has a beveled section right there, and that is where a snap ring goes on. But the way that this ear is designed, there's no way that you could get a snap ring on the backside. So it is perfectly seated all the way around, but there's just no way that you can get that snap ring all the way around. So for the top ball joint, it's gonna be the same process. I'm just gonna put a little bit of red and tacky on here all the way around, just so that it is somewhat lubricated when it was going up. But on the top one right here, you can get the snap ring on. It's just this bottom one you can't. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this one pressed up. I verified that everything is lined up, and I can actually feel the ball joint right here, and it's not a bind. So I believe now I can start tightening up just a wee bit, just making sure that everything stays in line whenever it's tight. All right, so that feels pretty seated. Let's see if it looks seated. So I did end up using that kit from Dynatrac. So you can see right here, it's perfectly seated all the way around, and I've got plenty of room for my new snap ring to go on. Sick. So now I'm taking the snap ring, just place it around. So now I can just verify that my snap ring is completely seated all the way around, and we're good to go. I have successfully installed both of these ball joints.
That's awesome!
So now that I have the ball joint squared away, I'm going to focus on getting this new Synergy Knuckle on. So I do have the steering stop in right here. I did put the Loctite on there. So now I'm going to get this caster sleeve. The sleeve actually points to the outside upwards the tire. So that's how it came off. That's how I'm going to put it back on. So I'm just going to slide the caster sleeve up just like that. And then I'm going to go on to the vehicle. Just take one of these nuts right here, and I'm just going to spin it on a little bit. That way this don't drop or hit my toes or anything like that. So now I'm going to take the top ball joint nut and slide that on right there. And pull that up. So I'm going to be using a 22mm socket, and I'm just going to just tighten down just a little bit right now until I can get my torque wrench on there. As I'm tightening these up, I'm just making sure there's no binding, there's no hard spots or anything like that. So I'm just going to tighten that up just a little bit more. There's no shaking or anything. All right, so I've got them pretty much as tight as I'm comfortable with tightening them without putting them on a torque wrench. So I'm going to take my precise built torque wrench and go ahead and torque these down. So this top one will be going to 55 foot-pounds, and the bottom one will be going to 48. Alright, so that's at 55, and this one is at 48, and there's no binding, there's no shaking. This feels 1,000 times better than what the factory setup did. Holy crap. So now that I have this side where I want it, I'm going to jump to the passenger side and go ahead and get it to this point right here. That way I can start putting stuff on, such as my steering components and stuff like that. So anyway, I'm gonna jump to the passenger side. So I now have the passenger side where this side is, and I'm going to go ahead and put my steering components on and feed that up and go and get the castle nut on that. So if you run into the problem that I'm having right now is when I try to tighten up this castle nut, the actual whole ball joint inside of the tie rod end wants to spin, but if you kind of go around the Zerk fitting and just push up on this really tight, just be careful if it's on a lift or jack stands. So now you'll be able to turn it without it spinning. And you can go ahead and tighten it on up. As you may not can see right here, I actually opted for the high steer knuckle. And what they do is they just put the taper on the upside. So that means this can just go, that can just kind of fall into place just like so. And this is the Synergy steering right here, just so you know. And I have had 0 complaints with it. It's been some of the best steering I've ever owned. And now I'm just gonna get the cotter pin on, I'm gonna get the castle nut on that. And now we can go ahead and torque these down. All right, so it is another night back in the shop, and check this out. So I got a little goodie basket from one of my sponsors, Yankum ropes. But check this out, I even got a Merry Christmas card, even have my name on it. That's awesome. So shout out to Yankum ropes. So I put Yankum ropes in all of my vehicles because I never know when I'm gonna have to be pulled out or pull somebody else out. I don't really have smart friends. So if you would like to get a couple of Yankum ropes for your rigs, make sure you check out my discount code. I have a link in the description to get you a certain percentage off. But anyway, that's enough talking. Let's get back to work on the Gladiator. So you might be asking, why does this have a high steer mount on the driver's side? Well, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but these knuckles are made for left-hand drive and right-hand drive JL and JT applications. So if you have a male Jeep, or you live outside of the United States or something like that, and you have a right-hand drive vehicle, you can order these and bolt them right on and be good to go. The first thing that I'm going to do in putting this back together is I'm going to put the axle shaft back in. So as you can see, the splines are pretty dirty. So I'm gonna get those cleaned up just because I don't want any of that nastiness to go inside of my differential. All right, that's good enough right there. So I'm just gonna slide this in. So now I'm going to be installing the unit bearings or the hub bearings, whatever you want to call them. I'd looked into getting some more of these, but the more I looked, the more I realized that these will probably be fine for right now. But just make sure when you put this back together that the sensor location is pointing forward. So I'm just going to line up these splines like this and give this a couple of taps. Nice. That went on like super easy. Before I put the bolts in, I gotta get my gatekeeper light bracket set back up. So I'm just gonna slide this in. Ha! Look at that. So it lined right up. So this fits perfect. So the gatekeeper mount fits absolutely perfect with the Synergy knuckles. So I was kind of worried about that because I really like these knuckle lights, but obviously my steering is more important. But I really didn't want to get rid of these. You can see right here the clearance. It's like these two pieces of metal were meant for each other. So now I can start tightening up these hub bolts. And I'm just going to get them hand tight for right now, and then I'm going to go to my eManualOnline on my laptop and look up the actual torque specs and everything. So as I'm putting all this stuff together, off camera, I'm looking on my eManualOnline, going through looking at every single torque spec all the way down, because you don't want to over tighten anything on suspension or steering, and you also don't want to have anything loose to where it could be potentially dangerous. It's always really good to have a reference point or a manual like that whenever you're tearing something down this much, because then you know in your mind everything is torqued down the way that it should be. So right here you have a spot for your speed sensor, and I'm just going to push that in and then take the Allen screw, put that on. I'm gonna be putting on the axle nut next. So what I like to do with these is just hit them, get them all the way down with an impact, and then come back with my torque wrench. The next thing that I'm gonna do is put on this dust shield. So this does accept the dust shield just fine. Now I'm gonna take my rotor and just slide up here. Make sure that the hole is lined up. So I do like to put just a little bit of anti-seize on this before I install it. Those rotor bolts can be a huge pain in the butt if they ever get seized up. And now I'm going to put the caliper on. So I'm going to be using the factory bolts that came out, and that's going to go right inside of the new knuckles. So that's basically everything besides putting the wheels and tires back on. So I just went back over everything referencing to my eManualOnline, just making sure that all my torque specs are correct and everything like that. So I know that's not going to be an issue. I made sure that my wires and everything up here are happy. Made sure that my speed sensor wire was out of the way. Just making sure that everything is the way it was. Now that I have this side all together, I'm going to jump to the passenger side and do an 80s montage. I did just kind of go around the neighborhood to do a little test of how it drives, and it drives extremely well, especially being able to actually turn. I did some kind of low speed tests, so where I was just kind of turning my tires back and forth at a stop sign, and it feels like it has hydro assist now. And I'm super excited to get this Jeep on the trails, is what it feels like actually going off-road. So the only thing that I think that I would have done differently is I would have not opted out for the high steer. I did see where I had just a little bit of bump steer. If you're not familiar with bump steer, it's when you are driving and you actually hit a bump, your steering wheel would want to turn just a little bit because of your steering geometry is not correct. The rule of thumb is you want your track bar and your drag link to be on the same plane with each other. This Jeep would benefit if I picked up the track bar mount just a little bit, or if I got an aftermarket track bar mount and actually picked it up and put it back in the same plane. Or I could actually figure out how to put the drag link back in the factory location, because I didn't have any bump steer to begin with, and now I noticed whenever I did hit a large bump on my test drive, and it did have just a little bit of bump steer. And this is not Synergy's fault. This is completely 100% my fault. I'm just being upfront and honest. I ordered the wrong thing. I should have known that if I picked up my drag link, I got to pick up my track bar. That's just me being dumb, and I will admit that. Other than the little bit of bump steer that I've got, It drives amazing. It's weird to say it drives better now than what it did, even though I have a little bit of bump steer. I'm gonna be doing a follow-up video on this for sure. So I just want to do a review video once I get this Jeep properly aligned and everything like that. I did do an alignment here in my shop, but I like to take it to a buddy of mine that actually has an alignment rack, and he can fine tune it after I do my alignment here. I appreciate y'all watching me install the Synergy knuckles and the Dynatrac ball joints on my 2020 Jeep Gladiator. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments below. I try to respond to every single comment that y'all put on my videos. I really appreciate those. They really do help the channel whenever you put comments down below. But anyway, guys, make sure that you are liked and subscribed so you don't miss out on any other content that I have here in my shop. And we will see y'all on the next one.
Bye.